As April 2025 approaches, several inmates across the United States are scheduled to face their final moments on death row. In this video, we'll go through each scheduled execution, breaking down the crimes that led to their sentences, the investigations that brought them to justice, and the lasting impact on the victims' families. Let's begin. Case 1. Michael Anthony Tanzy, State, Florida. Method: lethal injection. Michael Anthony Tanzy spent over 25 years on death row, but the crime he committed took just hours to change multiple lives forever. His violent past culminated in the horrifying 2000 murder of 25-year-old Janet Hathaway. Janet was a young woman with a bright future ahead of her, working as a sales associate while pursuing her passion for photography. Known for her infectious energy and kind nature, she was beloved by her friends and family, making her sudden disappearance all the more devastating. On the morning of April 25, 2000, Janet left her apartment in Miami to meet a friend for coffee. She never arrived. Concerned, her friend attempted to call her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Hours passed, and when Janet failed to return home, her roommate reported her missing. A frantic search began, but there were no immediate leads until a witness came forward. A gas station attendant recalled seeing a distressed young woman matching Janet's description inside a van driven by a disheveled man. Security footage from a nearby store confirmed the sighting, providing the first crucial lead in the case. That man was later identified as Michael Anthony Tanzy, a career criminal with a long history of arrests, including burglary, theft, and multiple violent offenses. Investigators would later piece together the horrifying series of events that unfolded that day. Tanzy, who was living out of his van at the time, had been driving aimlessly through Miami, looking for his next victim. He spotted Janet as she walked through a parking lot and approached her under the guise of needing directions. When she stopped to help, he pulled a gun and forced her into the van. What followed was a terrifying ordeal. Tanzy drove Janet around for hours, tying her hands and repeatedly threatening her life. He forced her to withdraw money from an ATM, growing increasingly agitated as she pleaded for her release. Prosecutors later described how Janet, in her final moments, did everything she could to reason with her captor, hoping he would spare her life. But Tanzy had no intention of letting her go. At some point during the drive, he pulled over in a secluded area, assaulted her, and ultimately strangled her to death. He then dumped her body in a wooded stretch of highway outside the city, hoping it would go unnoticed. However, his attempt to cover his tracks was futile. 2 days later, a passerby discovered Janet's remains and contacted authorities. The crime scene was grim. Her body showed signs of a violent struggle, and forensic evidence quickly pointed to Tanzy. Police tracked him down after identifying his vehicle on surveillance footage. When they arrested him, he was still in possession of Janet's ATM card, along with several items belonging to her. During interrogation, Tanzy initially denied any involvement, but as detectives laid out the overwhelming evidence against him, his story crumbled. Eventually, he confessed to the abduction and murder, providing chilling details about how he had overpowered Janet and taken her life. At trial, the prosecution painted a picture of a man with no remorse, someone who had a history of escalating violence and had finally committed the ultimate crime. The defense attempted to argue that Tanzy's troubled upbringing and mental health struggles should be taken into account, but the jury was unmoved. The brutality of the crime, the clear premeditation, and the utter lack of mercy Tanzy showed left no doubt in their minds. In 2003, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Over the years, he filed multiple appeals, claiming ineffective counsel and arguing that his confession had been coerced. Each attempt to overturn his conviction failed, as the courts upheld the strength of the case against him. After more than 2 decades on death row, Michael Anthony Tanzy is scheduled for execution on April 8, 2025. Case 2. Michael Dean, State, South Carolina. Method of execution: firing squad. In the world of violent criminals, Michael Dean Mahdi stood out for his sheer lack of conscience. His crime was so cold-blooded, so ruthless, that even the most hardened officers at his trial said they had never seen anything like it. Mahdi had escaped from a Georgia work release program, setting off on a cross-country crime spree, that involved burglaries, carjackings, and violent assaults. But his worst crime came when he murdered a police officer in cold blood, for nothing more than a traffic violation. It happened on a quiet highway in South Carolina. Trooper Willie Davis, a veteran officer with 2 kids at home, had pulled Moises over for a broken taillight. He had no idea that he had just stopped a killer. As he approached Moises' car, dashcam footage captured the moment the driver's side door opened, and without hesitation, Moises pulled a 9mm handgun and fired. The bullet struck Trooper Davis in the forehead, killing him instantly. But Moises didn't stop there. He got out of his car, stood over Davis's lifeless body, and shot him 3 more times, execution style. Within 72 hours, a massive manhunt led to Moises' arrest. He was hiding in an abandoned house, still in blood-stained clothes. At his trial, the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury took less than an hour to sentence him to death. Now, after 21 years behind bars, Moises will soon face the execution chamber. South Carolina law allows lethal injection, the electric chair, or a firing squad. Recently, Moises opted for the firing squad, making him one of the rare inmates in modern U.S. history to choose this method. This decision has reignited debate surrounding the use of firing squads, a practice that has been largely phased out but remains legal in certain states. Execution date: April 11, 2025. Case 3: Moises Sandoval, Mendoza State, Texas. Method of execution: lethal injection. Moises Sandoval Mendoza was convicted of the brutal murder of Rachel O'Neal Tollison in Texas. On the night of March 9, 2004, Mendoza, then 22 years old, kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered 20-year-old Tollison, a young mother from Princeton, Texas. The case would go on to horrify the community, leading to one of the most closely followed capital punishment cases in Texas. According to investigators, Tollison was last seen leaving her home after receiving a late-night phone call. It was later revealed that Mendoza, an acquaintance, had lured her out under false pretenses. She had trusted him, unaware of the true danger that awaited her. Once he had her alone, he abducted her and took her to a remote location, where he brutally assaulted her before strangling and stabbing her multiple times. The details of the attack were particularly gruesome, with forensic reports indicating severe injuries that suggested prolonged suffering before her death. After killing her, Mendoza attempted to dispose of her body by setting it on fire in an effort to destroy evidence. However, the fire was not enough to completely erase the evidence, and investigators were able to extract crucial forensic material that would later be used to convict him. When Tollison failed to return home, her family immediately sensed something was wrong. They reported her missing, sparking an intensive search effort that lasted several days. Authorities, along with community volunteers, combed through nearby fields, wooded areas, and abandoned properties in an attempt to find any trace of Tollison. It was a devastating moment for the town when her burned remains were discovered in a rural area outside of Princeton. Her body was almost unrecognizable, but forensic experts were able to identify her using dental records and DNA testing. Evidence collected from the crime scene, as well as witness testimony, quickly led investigators to Mendoza. His behavior in the days following the murder raised suspicion, as he had suddenly disappeared from social circles and exhibited signs of distress when questioned by police. When confronted with the forensic evidence linking him to the crime, Mendoza initially denied involvement but later changed his story multiple times. His inconsistent statements and the mounting DNA evidence led to his arrest soon after. Mendoza's trial began in 2005 and quickly became a media spectacle. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, including Mendoza's DNA found on the victim and the forensic link between him and the crime scene. Testimonies from forensic experts detailed the horrifying nature of the attack, and witness statements placed Mendoza near the crime scene on the night of Tollison's disappearance. Additionally, surveillance footage and phone records helped establish his movements leading up to the crime. The defense attempted to argue that Mendoza had been intoxicated and acted impulsively, claiming that his judgment was impaired by drugs and alcohol. However, the prosecution countered this argument by highlighting the premeditated nature of the crime, showing that Mendoza had lured Tolleson out of her home and had made attempts to cover his tracks after the murder. After just a few hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on capital murder charges. On October 20, 2005, Moises Sandoval Mendoza was sentenced to death. As the judge read the sentence, there was an audible sense of relief among Tolleson's family members who had endured a harrowing legal process to see justice served. Some wept, while others sat silently, absorbing the weight of the moment. Since his sentencing, Mendoza has spent nearly 2 decades on death row at the Allen B. Polunsky Unit, a maximum security prison in Texas known for housing some of the most notorious criminals awaiting execution. Over the years, he has filed numerous appeals, citing claims of ineffective legal representation and requesting a re-examination of forensic evidence using modern technology. However, each of these appeals has been denied, and legal experts believe that Mendoza has exhausted all possible legal avenues to overturn his sentence. Now, with his execution scheduled for April 23, 2025, Mendoza faces his final days as the legal system prepares to carry out the sentence. The execution will take place at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, where lethal injection remains the primary method of capital punishment. Case 4, James Osgood, State, Alabama. Method of execution: lethal injection. On October 23, 2010, Tracy Lynn Brown, a 26-year-old woman from Chilton County, Alabama, failed to show up for work. Concerned, her employer reached out, but there was no response. It wasn't long before a welfare check led to the horrifying discovery of her lifeless body inside her home. What investigators would uncover in the following days would expose the unimaginable cruelty she suffered in her final moments. Osgood and his then-girlfriend had been harboring violent fantasies, dark thoughts that had spiraled out of control. Together they planned and carried out the abduction of Brown, trapping her in what would become a nightmarish ordeal. She was sexually assaulted and brutalized before Osgood delivered the final gruesome act, slashing her throat and leaving her to die. The crime scene painted a picture of terror and suffering, evidence of the unthinkable violence she had endured. Law enforcement wasted no time in piecing together what had happened. The forensic evidence left behind, combined with witness testimonies, quickly led to Osgood's arrest. His girlfriend, who was also implicated in the crime, became a key witness, providing further insight into the horrific events of that night. As the case against Osgood grew stronger, it became clear that there would be no escaping justice. His first trial in 2014 resulted in a conviction, and he was sentenced to death. However, due to errors in jury instructions, an appeals court overturned his sentence. This granted him a resentencing in 2018, but instead of fighting for his life, Osgood shocked the court by requesting the death penalty himself. He expressed his belief in the concept of an eye for an eye, and admitted that he deserved the ultimate punishment. But his actions after receiving the death sentence told a different story. Osgood continued to appeal his case, filing multiple challenges over the years. Each attempt to overturn the conviction failed, and as time went on, he seemed to lose his will to fight. In early 2024, he formally dropped all remaining appeals, writing in a letter to his attorney that he was tired and wanted to complete his sentence. His decision paved the way for his execution date to be set. Alabama, a state with one of the highest execution rates in the country, has long been at the center of the death penalty debate. For the family of Tracy Lynn Brown, the years of waiting are finally coming to an end. They have endured over a decade of trials, appeals, and delays, all while carrying the unbearable weight of their loss. The case of James Osgood stands as yet another reminder of the devastating impact of violent crime, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the inescapable finality of a death sentence. James Osgood is set to be executed on April 24, 2025 at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama. His execution will be carried out by lethal injection, the primary method used in Alabama for capital punishment. As April 2025 came to an end, So did the lives of the individuals whose crimes led them to death row. Their stories serve as a grim reminder of the devastating consequences of violence, not just for the victims and their families, but for the perpetrators themselves. Each case we've covered today reflects years of legal battles, emotional turmoil, and unanswered questions that will linger long after their executions. For some, the debate over capital punishment remains a divisive issue. Is it true justice, or is it state-sanctioned retribution? Regardless of where you stand, one thing is certain: these crimes left a permanent mark on history, and no sentence, no final words, and no last meals will ever undo the suffering they caused. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think justice was served? If you found this video informative, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth coverage of true crime cases. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.